Okay. Lamed Hey Beis 35b, last line on the page. Okay. Basically, we're going to start today by learning about two different types of korban shvuah. What is a korban shvuah? A shvuah, obviously, as you know, is a type of oath. And there are two associated korbanos which we'll learn about. And Osham and Achadas. There we are. Thank you. Osham and Achadas. And we'll see that if you make an oath of which you have financial gain, so in other words, the oath saves you money, and it turns out the oath is a lie. So then you bring, I believe it's an Osham. Yeah, that's an Osham. If, however, you make an oath and it turns out, and the oath would not have saved you money. So remember, we spoke about the oath of Rav Huna, right? That's what we spoke. We spoke about it yesterday, and we started off on Wednesday. What was the oath of Rav Huna? The oath of Rav Huna was of a watchman who's watching a Rolex, right? And then he claims it was stolen, and he says, "You know what? I don't want to make an oath. I'm going to pay you." Says Rav Huna, "No. Maybe he's keeping the Rolex." So he makes an oath. That oath does not save him money. He's paying anyway. If he made an oath to say that it was stolen, that would be an oath to save money. If he lied under oath, he'd bring an osham. But if he lied under oath that he actually did have it, but he had to pay anyway, that type of oath would bring you a chatos. Okay, now this is in context of the Mishnah. The Mishnah here is referring to somebody who borrowed an animal. Somebody rented an animal and then lent it to somebody else. Right? So he's a seicher and then a mashal. Mashal is she'ela, it's borrowing and lending, but again, like we pointed out, she'el and mashal is the word that's used when the item has to be returned as is. If the item is expendable, you pay the equivalent new item that's called a malva and a leva. So you talk about the borrower. You talk about there was a renter and then a lender, right? The renter rented it from the original owner and then lent it to somebody else. So you have a renter and a lender. So it's possible that the renter and the lender, it's possible they both will make an oath and if they lied under oath, they bring a chatos. That means they both had no financial gain. It's possible they both do have financial gain, and therefore, if they lied under oath, they bring an osham. It's possible that the seicher would have to bring a chatos, meaning that his oath, he did not gain from his oath, and the shal did gain from his oath, so he brings a chatos, he brings an asham. The seicher gained, the shal did not gain, and therefore the shal will bring the chatos, and the seicher will bring the asham. Okay, so let's explain. Firas moment, lying about money and under oath, asham. Bitos v'sayim, lying under oath that made no financial difference. You paid anyway. That penalty is chatos. How is it possible they both make a chatos? The animal died in its sleep, right? Regular type of death. And they both said nensa. They both said that the animal there was something beyond our control. And the animal died. One second. Okay. So what happened was the animal died suddenly. They both claimed it died because it was killed by armed robbers. So they lied about the story. Now, in either scenario, whether it was killed by armed robbers or whether it died in its sleep, the renter is exempt. Because the renter is exempt from einus, beyond, unforeseen circumstances. The shayel, the borrower in both scenarios, is liable. Because he is liable in unforeseen circumstances. The only exception to shayel is if it dies in the way of work, in the line of work. If it dies in its sleep, you still have to pay. So in both cases, in this scenario, under both circumstances, the true story and the fake story, the renter is exempt and the borrower is liable. So therefore, nobody made an oath here to exempt themselves from payment. They both make a chatas. Next, it's possible they both make an osham. The animal was stolen. They said it died in the normal course of work. The Travaya Kafir Mimoina. They're both making this claim to exempt themselves from payments. Okay, so it actually was stolen. They claim it died in the line of work. Okay, so in this case, if it was stolen, both of them have to pay. Now that it died in the line of work, they're both exempt. Okay, the Kapajin Shai, therefore in this scenario, they both get an Osham because they're both lying for financial gain. The Seicher has to bring a Chatos and the borrower has to bring an Osham, meaning the borrower gains, the Seicher does not gain. How did that happen? It died suddenly. And they claimed it died in the normal course of work. Okay, now remember, Seicher, a renter, is exempt from any unforeseen circumstances. It makes no difference whether it died in its sleep for the renter. It makes no difference whether the animal died in its sleep or it died in the course of work. Both scenarios he's exempt. So if he lied about it under oath, what's the halacha? He brings a chatos. A chatos because he didn't lie for financial gain. However, the shayl here is gaining. He claims he's exempt because it died in the course of work. And the truth is, it died from being stolen. It was stolen, or it died suddenly. Either one, you're liable in this, and he would have been liable. So he lied for financial gain. He brings an osham. Now you get to the hardest one. Seicher ba'osham v'shal b'chatas. The seicher has to bring an osham. The shal brings a chatas. How did that happen? The animal was stolen. For Omru, they said Mesik Kedarka died in the normal way. Okay, so what happens? The animal was stolen, and they said it died in its sleep. So the renter, by saying that it died in its sleep, he lied for financial gain. He exempted himself. The borrower, on the other hand, did not exempt himself, because the borrower would have had to pay in either scenario, whether it died in its sleep or it was stolen. The borrower still has to pay, because the borrower has utter liability, complete, total liability. Okay. 1 second. Okay. So the borrower, he didn't lie for financial gain. He just had a plain lie. So therefore, he brings a chatos for plain lie. My kamashmalan, what's going on here? Obviously, this seems to be nice calculation, but obviously it seems to line up well. So Gemara says to point out, not like the opinion of Rabbi Dovid Yehudah, I say ein chayavin olav mishum mishuas piti. Shneimar oinef kisi shava vatus asayim kisi shava me'atzma kamashmalan. Rav Ami basically says that anytime the court makes an oath, they'll bring an osham. You'll never bring a chatas for a court imposed oath. And this clearly disagrees. Like Rav Ami, clearly we disagree with the opinion of Rav Ami. Okay, we are halfway down Lamed Vav Min Aleph 36a. First word line is Itmar, and we're about to begin a new topic. And this is quite a lively one and very important here. So it's based on the premise of the Mishnah. The Mishnah says what happened. There was a renter, right? And then he lent it out to somebody else. Now, if you ever sign a contract, most the contracts specifically stipulate that you cannot sublet or sub-borrow the item to somebody else, right? Because
you didn't stipulate in the contract.
Well, here we go. So kick it off. Itmar. So what happens if he didn't stipulate, as Eric says? Let's learn. Let's see. Itmar. So remember now we have 4 types of watchmen, right? We have a shomer chinam, a shomer sachar, a seicher, and a shayel. An unpaid, a paid, a renter, and a borrower. It's like we said, and the balance here is an unpaid watchman, all the benefit accrues to the owner. Make sense?
Yeah.
In a paid watchman, most of the benefit accrues to the owner, some benefit, the payment, the premium, that goes to the watchman. So there's more liability. Then we have seicher, or renter, which is sort of a fair trade, right? The renter pays for a service and he gets to use the item. And then we have shayel, which all the benefit accrues to the borrower. The lender has no benefit whatsoever, and he's maximally responsible.
That's the guy who does it. He's
the only exception is if it dies in the normal course of work.
Right, and this is the guy that says paid full freight for his service.
What do you mean?
Right, this is the guy. He's paid.
No. Borrower is not paid at all.
Borrower. Oh, we're talking borrowers again.
The borrower is most liable because the lender has almost no benefit.
Okay.
right? All the benefit accrues to the borrower,
Got it. Okay, got it. Wait.
right? Okay, so now, and one of the important things you have to keep in mind here is
You just say so, Rabbi.
what happens if a shomer chinam gives it to a shomer sacher. So now he increases the liability benefit, right?
Okay.
Well, is that any different?
Hmm.
So let's see. Itmar, shomer shemas lo shomer. You have a watchman who hands it over to another watchman. And like we said, it could be a watchman, it could be a renter, it could be a borrower. They're all in the 4 categories of watchmen. Rav says, Potter. If the second watchman loses it, you're exempt. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with doing this. Rabbi Yochanan says you are liable. You should not be handing it over to somebody else. Amar Abaya explains. The time of the Rav, according to the reason of Rav, if there's a shomer chinam who gives it over to a shomer sacher, so I'm watching your item for free, right? I'm exempt from basically everything, except for gross negligence. And then I decided, you know what? I can't watch it anymore. I pay Eric to watch it for me. So now, if the animal's stolen, Eric would have to pay because he's a paid watchman. So I actually benefited you. I give you more liability coverage, right? The Uli Ayla Shemaras, that for sure works, according to Rav. According to Rav. My time however, so according to Rav, this is permissible. Not only is it permissible for a shomer chinam to hand it over to a shomer sacher, but it's also permissible to decrease your liability by me handing it over to a shomer chinam. I'm a paid watchman. You paid me to watch it. I hand it over to Jules, who's an unpaid watchman, and the item is stolen. Then now he's exempt, and I would be exempt too, because he's a shomer chinam.
They're both exempt.
They're both exempt. Okay, and according to the reason of Rabbi Yochanan, according to Rabbi Yochanan, it says it's prohibited to do so. It's certainly prohibited if a shomer sacher gives to a shomer chinam because it decreases the liability. Right, the shomer sacher has increased liability, the shomer chinam has decreased liability. Even a unpaid watchman that gives it over to a shomer sacher, so he increases the liability. Now there's more possibility of payment if there is negligence in the shmirah, in the watching. Chayev, he is liable. Why? The simple argument of the original owner is, I trusted you, I don't trust somebody else. I don't want you to I gave it to you, I don't want you to hand it over to somebody else. Amar of Chizis. Rav Chizis says, Rav did not specifically make this point, that it is permitted to hand over one watchman to another watchman. It was interpreted, it was inferred from a story. What was the story? So there were these gardeners, and every day, I believe they translate marayu as a shovel, a hoe. So they had this hoe, and every day they'd finish the gardening job, and they give it over to this safta, an older person. One day, I guess the safta was busy maybe or something, and instead of giving the hoe to the elderly gentleman, they gave it to one of the gardeners who was appointed to watch the hoe. Okay. Shama Kolabe Hilulos. What do you hear? You hear the wedding hall is busy. Nafik Asal. So he decided he wants to go join the wedding. So he found the elderly gentleman that typically watched the hoe, and he gave it to the guy, told him to watch it. What happened? By the time he comes back from the wedding, Igniv Marayo. The hoe is stolen. Also come to Rav. So they come in front of Rav, Upatra, and Rav says you're exempt from paying. Man, the guy who told the story, he thought the reason was because one watchman is allowed to hand it off to another watchman. But really, there was another catch. This is different. Why? Because we know that the Safta, the older guy, was an approved watchman. How do we know? Because every day they were giving him the hoe. So this is different. Under normal circumstances, you can hand over one watchman to another one. But over here, it's as if he's sort of a certified, acceptable alternative. What makes him certified? Because they used him every day. It happens to be that day they couldn't find him. So it doesn't really prove the point of Rav.
Oh.
Yeah? Fair enough?
Yeah.
Okay. Yosef Ravami. So Ravami was discussing this question. He was discussing this question. So Rabbi Mamel has a question from Rav Ashi. The question is from our Mishnah. What does the Mishnah say? Somebody rents a cow and then loans it out. And it dies in its sleep. One second. So the renter. One second. The renter makes an oath that the animal died in the normal course of work.
Naturally.
Naturally. Naturally. So the renter makes the oath that it died naturally. And the borrower pays the renter. The fundamental question is, how was the renter allowed to loan it out to somebody else? This is exactly an example of Shemer and Shemas L'Shemer. And we see clearly the Mishnah allows it. Okay. Basically, the original owner gave him permission as a renter to loan it out to other people. So he didn't make the typical contract gets a stipulation that says you can't sublet it or rent it out or lend it out. Over here, he was allowed to. If that's the case, then he should have to pay to the original owners. One second. Okay, it's in other words, if the owner is allowing him is allowing the renter to lend it out, then the borrower should have to pay the original owner. Why is it the borrower pays the renter, but the renter is exempt from paying the original owner? If the owner authorizes both events, so it's as if the owner directly lent it to the lender. If that's the case, the lender is responsible to the owner, not to the renter. The Mishnah says the lender pays the renter, who gets to keep the money and make an oath and exempt himself from paying the owner. Right? So the lender, renter, owner. In this case, because the scenario, the way it died was sudden and unforeseen, the renter pauses the interaction there. He keeps the money and he makes an oath and exempts himself. However, if the original owner authorized the lending, so then why don't we see that as a direct authorization? I am directly lending money to the guy who you're lending it to, who the renter's lending it to, and therefore the borrower should pay directly to the original owner. Make sense? What?
So processing. No, it's okay.
Let's get to the conclusion. It'll probably make sense. Okay.
Okay.
So the Gemara says,
please, Rabbi.
1 second, and we are 4 lines in the bottom of the page. Third one in the line, the Amru, Lei, L'daitoch. Okay, let's explain the conclusion first. What happens here is as follows: the owner rents it to the renter, who lends it to the borrower. Okay, over here, the conclusion of the Gemara is that the owner authorized the renter to lend it out. However, he said, look, the consequences of that loan, I don't want to take responsibility for it. You're responsible for what happens next. So because the renter is responsible for any loan that he issues, it's not a direct relationship. His responsibility interferes between the owner and the lender. And that's why the lender pays the renter, and the renter does not pay the owner if the way it died was a way that the renter would have been exempt otherwise. So like if it suddenly dies, it dies in its sleep or something.
Right.
So the renter is exempt from that. He doesn't pay the owner. The renter does not pay the owner, but he does collect from the lender. Most of Rome Berchoma had the following question: somebody gave his friend money to watch Tzara, and he put them in his bag. He carried them on his back. He gave it to his kids, and he put his kids in a room with the money, and he locked the door. But it wasn't a good lock. It was like, type of lock the kids can get around. Chayav, he's liable. Why? He didn't watch the way he was supposed to watch it. You're obligated to completely lock the door. The reason is because they were underage. But if they were adults, Potter, he'd be exempt. In other words, the problem here is that if you don't lock the door and you have a bunch of kids in the house who can unlock it, then that's not called watching. But if on the other hand, you didn't lock the door, but you had adults in the house, that would be satisfactory. Well, why? Why can't the guy argue? Well, I give it to you, not to your kids. Even if your kids are adults, I don't care. I wanted you to watch it, not your kids. So why would he be exempt? So Rava says, top of next page, Lamed Vav Beis, 36b, Aldas kol mafkid aldas ishtay abonav who mafkid. Anyone who entrusts an item to watch, he knows the guy's adult children and wife will be involved in the watching of the item. So you can't say, well, I didn't give it to you and not to your kids. Because you give it to the guy, you give it to his wife and kids.
But he says adult children. So
In other words, if they're adult children, then it's considered watch because it's an adult that's present. What about the fact that he never gave it to those adult kids? Doesn't make a difference because if you give it to an adult, you can presume his wife and kids, his wife and adult children will participate in watching the animal, the item. Okay. Amri Nardoi. Nardoi says, Chayav. It points out specifically that the because he gave it to children, therefore you're liable. But if they were given to an adult, you would be exempt. However, but the point of the story here is that specifically it was given to his children. That adult children satisfy the watching requirement.
Okay.
But adult of somebody else's children, adult strangers, then there is no exemption for liability. Why? Because you should not be handing over your stuff to another watchman. The imkain listening tanim, stamashmami, listening tanim, stamashmami. No, in other words, it could have just said children. It could have said children without saying his children, his sons. Right? Why does it say his sons? Because his sons as adults actually do work. Because give it to a guy, you understand that his wife and children are going to be involved in watching, but you understand that strangers will not be involved in watching, and if they were, then the watchman is liable for giving it to strangers because he should not have given it to them. Okay, Amar Rava says Hilchos of the halacha is shemer shemosel shemer chayav. You're not allowed to do this. If you do it, you're liable. Not only a paid watchman that gives it over to an unpaid watchman who decreases the liability. Even if a unpaid watchman gives it to a paid watchman, so he increases the liability, he's still not allowed to do so. Why? Because the original owner could say, I trust you as an unpaid watchman with an oath. But your friend, I don't trust with an oath. So it doesn't make a difference if you paid him. I still don't trust him. Okay. Itmar we learned. Okay, so there would have been an interesting scenario. Everything started off wrong, but then what they call an act of God happened, and it wouldn't have made a difference. Okay, so what was the story? The guy wasn't watching the animal and it went into the forest. And then it dropped dead. Died suddenly. So there's debate about what Rabba said. Abaya says, in the name of Rabba, Chayev, you're liable. Because you started off negligent. Rava Mishmei Rabba Amar Potter. Rava, in the name of Rabba, says you're exempt. Let's explain each opinion. Abaya Mishmei Rabba Amar Chayev. Okay. Let me just preface with one more point. There's a general debate which we'll get to later, which is where somebody starts off negligent, but then his negligence leads into a path of unforeseen circumstances. We'll discuss it later. We'll get to it in less than a week. This is called tchilase b'pshia v'seife ba'ines. Tchilase b'pshia means you started off tchila. The beginning was b'pshia. Pshia is gross negligence, basically intentional. V'seife in the end, ba'ines. Ines is unforeseen, beyond your control. Okay, so there's a debate whether that is considered liable or not. So let's go through each one. The guy brings his animal in, the guy lets his animal go to the forest and then it drops dead. You're liable. Not only that, anyone who doesn't, any judge doesn't agree with me, he's not a judge. Right? According to the opinion that says, with an initial negligence and a conclusion of unforeseen circumstances that you're liable, the chayev that this would be the same scenario. right? You were negligent for letting the animal go into the forest.
Right.
And even though unforeseen circumstances happened and it suddenly died, you're still liable. Even according to the opinion that says, under such circumstances, normally you're exempt. Over here, you'd be liable. Because we say the ear of the forest is what killed it. Sort of wasn't used to it. It was used to the ear of the field. It came into the forest. The ear of the forest was a contributing factor. Because it's a contributing factor, therefore you're liable. Rava says you're exempt. And Rava says the same story. Sort of defining definition. What does it mean to be a judge? To agree with Rava. Right? Right? Anyone who doesn't agree with Rava is not a judge. Certainly according to the opinion that says initial negligence and conclusion unforeseen circumstances, you're exempt. Then over here you're also exempt. According to the opinion that says you're liable, over here you're exempt. My timer. Very famous Talmudical phrase. The angel of death, what do I care? Does he care where the object is located? Now, if you do remember at the conclusion toward the end of Masechta Saita, if you remember, we had a conversation with the angel of death, right? And one of the things we learned about the angel of death there was that he can only kill where he's authorized to kill. He's only authorized to kill in a specific location. If you remember, there was a story there with Shlomo HaMelech. He saw the angel of death very upset because he wanted to kill two people. So he immediately transported them to the gates of a city where where if they entered the city, they wouldn't be able to die, called the city of Luz. And they were killed at the gates of the city. So then the next day saw the angel of death very happy. He said, "What happened?" He says, "I killed them." He says, "What happened? How'd you kill them?" He says, "No." He says, "The only authorization I had to kill them was at the gates of Luz, and they weren't there. So you helped me out and you brought them there for me." Okay. However, I guess that I would have to presume that refers to the angel of death killing people. Over here, it's referring to the angel of death killing animals. The point is, if it was going to die suddenly, it wouldn't make a difference where it was going to die. Could have died in your property or could have died in the forest. And therefore, there's zero culpability for this, even if there was a small amount of negligence, but the negligence did not result in the unforeseen circumstance.
Is this the final din or still in
That's according to the opinion of Rava. So we have a debate here.
Okay, right.
Rava has this argument in right? The angel of death can strike an animal anywhere. And Abaye says, no. The ear of the forest could have been a contributing factor. Okay. Abaye agrees the Hajjal Beimara Umeisa the Potter. If the animal goes back to the owner's to the watchman's house and then it dies, you're exempt. My this ear of the forest will only kill you when you're in the forest. As soon as you leave the forest, it doesn't have any long-term side effects. Okay. If the animal was stolen in the forest and then it dies, you're liable. My time. Okay, so let's explain again. So you have the guy. So according to Rava, the guy lets the animal in the forest. A thief obviously can pick it up in the forest pretty easily, which is what he did, and then it suddenly dies. We're saying, so why don't we give the same argument? The angel of death would kill the animal anywhere. The argument is invalid. Why? Because let's say the angel of death wouldn't have killed the animal. Well, where is it? Stolen, right? The owner lost the animal before it was killed. So before the angel of death killed it. So therefore, the watchman here is negligent for letting the animal go into the forest. Because of his negligence, the animal was stolen, because it's very easy to steal animals in the forest. And therefore, the watchman has to pay.
End of the day, bottom line, it was stolen, and it got stolen on his watch because he was negligent.
Exactly. That's what he has to, that's what he has to pay. So Abaye says to Rava, okay. So this goes back to the Gemara we asked before. We asked a question in the Gemara previously. We had a question whether one watchman is allowed to give permission to another watchman, right? Is one watchman allowed to hand over to another watchman? And the Gemara asks for the Mishnah. The Mishnah talks about a renter and a borrower, right? And what happened to the animal? It suddenly died.
Okay.
1 second. Okay, and we said the reason in the Mishnah why the renter is exempt is because in the case of the Mishnah he was authorized to lend his animal to the borrower. He got authorization. Why do you need that resolution? We have another resolution here. It's true that I violated the laws of watchmen by giving it over to a borrower, but who cares? Angel death kills anyway. So therefore, it's true that I started off negligent, but according to Rava, that makes the argument. The angel of death, he can find you wherever you are, then he should be exempt for that argument alone. The reason why, it could be that you're forbidden to hand over an animal, but the reason why you'd be exempt from payment is because because the angel of death can kill the animal anyway. So Amalais, he says to him, okay, so Gemara explains as follows. There are two potential reasons why a watchman can't hand over to another watchman. If the reason is because I don't want it, then you're right. In this scenario, the guy didn't want it, but it made no difference. At the end of the day, the animal suddenly died. So in other words, the owner didn't want the renter to hand over the animal to a borrower. Let's say, for argument's sake.
Okay.
And he did it anyway. But the animal died because of the angel of death. He kills everywhere. It doesn't make a difference for him. That would be a legitimate question. That could be a resolution. There's the reason why you'd be exempt here is even though you were negligent in handing over to the person you weren't supposed to, but the angel of death would have killed him anyway. However, according to Rava's argument, Rava explains that that's not the reason why one watchman can't give it to another watchman. The reason is because I don't trust him with an oath. And if I don't trust him with an oath, then it does make a difference who I'm trusting with an oath. It does make a difference who I gave it over. Because it's not about what happened to the animal, it's about who makes the oath here. Right? In other words, the question is who's going to make the oath here? The borrower or the which watchman will make the oath? The first watchman or the second watchman? So in this case, what the owner says, look, I trust you, the renter, with an oath. I don't trust the borrower with an oath. So therefore, the renter cannot exempt himself with the oath of the borrower because I don't trust the borrower to make the oath.
Okay.
It's not about what actually happened. It's about the oath. So it's about the oath that it does make a difference who has it. As if we were talking about what happened to the item, we could say, well, angel of death, he kills everywhere. But it's not about the angel of death. That's not the point. It's not a point what happened to the animal. Because how do I know what happened to the animal? I have to make an oath. Well, I trust you and I don't trust him. And if he's going to be the one that has to make the oath, then you have to pay me. Because I never trusted him in the first place. Yeah, it's good. It's innovative. No?
Yeah. Hey.
It's a good argument. Okay. Okay. Masav Rav Merchama. Rav Merchama has the following question. Hell Rosh Sukin. So he what did he do? He took the animal up to the top of Mount St. Helens, right? It was a peak mountain. It was easy to fall on the mountain. The nafla, the animal falls down. Ein za'onis. It's not considered unforeseen circumstances. It's sort of predictable. L'chayev, you're liable. But if it dies regularly, dies normally, that's considered an einis, and you're exempt. Well, Abaye here is making a special forest ear. The animal's not used to it, kills it. Presumably, there's also a mountain ear, right? And the mountain ear can also kill the animal if it's not used to it. Inami uftsana dahar kotla. Either it was the temperature, or it was the
humidity.
No, the tiredness. The
steepness of the mountain.
The animal was exhausted from climbing up the mountain.
Page
It was exhausting.
Rabbi, we still on 36b.
Yes, we are 4 lines on top of the wide lines.
Everything had a heart
Okay.
attack.
So the Mars is Hachmaiskina and Shehela Lamira Shaman V'Toiv. Okay, this sometimes you see in the northern part of the hemisphere. We have very cold places, but the mirror, the pasture is excellent. So the tree, it's sort of too cold for the trees to grow, but the grass can grow very well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where he brought the animals to. Yeah, okay, the mirror Shaman V'Toiv. And because it's very good pasture there, so that's why he was allowed to bring the animal to pasture there. That was considered sort of normal. So then if it falls down off the mountain, why are you not exempt? In other words, that's sort of the risk. If you take it to a mountainous grazing area, it might fall down. So Martin says, he was close enough, he could have grabbed it and prevented it from falling. He didn't even grab it. Let's look at the first part of the brisa. Also, if the animal of its own accord went to the mountain peak and fell off, he's exempt. So Gemara says he should have grabbed it. So Gemara says he did. He did grab it, but also tekfasa v'yarda. What happened was the animal sort of escaped his clutches, ran up to the top of the mountain, and it fell off by itself. So he's an inus, and therefore he's exempt. Okay. Oh. Now we saw the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. We'll finish the last Kamma in a few minutes.
Okay.
The opinion of Rabbi Yossi was that, remember the Mishnah. The Mishnah says that it was a renter and a borrower. And the renter sort of gets the bonus here. He gets to keep the value of the animal, and he's exempt from paying that value to the owner. And Rabbi Yossi says, how could that be? How can you do business with somebody else's animal? Not going to happen. You have to, you must, according to Rabbi Yossi, the renter must give the money to the owner. Amar Yehudah Mishmuel halacha Rabbi Yossi. The halacha follows Rabbi Yossi. Amar Shmuel Bar Yehudah Amar Mishmei Shmuel Chalak Kai Rabbi Yossi Af Barishayna. Halacha Kamaisei ain't halacha Kamaisei. Okay, so now Rabbi Yehudah, he wants to know, does Rabbi Yossi disagree also in the first Gemara? In the scenario, does Rabbi Yossi say that if you pay without making an oath, that you get to keep the kefil? Remember, the first line of the Mishnah was the guy paid without an oath, he gets to keep the kefil. Does Rabbi Yossi disagree and say, no, even though you paid, you still don't get to keep the kefil, the owner gets to keep the kefil. So which is it? And so does Rabbi Yossi disagree or not? And if he does disagree, halacha kamaisi and halacha kamaisi, does halacha follow him or not? Amar Leisi says, Cholakaya Rabbi Yossi af b'rishayna. Rabbi Yossi says that even if you pay without making an oath, you still don't get the kefil. But halacha kamaisi af b'rishayna, and the halacha follows Rabbi Yossi as well. Also in that scenario. Itranami, we learned as well. Amar Belazar Cholakaya Rabbi Yossi af b'rishayna, halacha kamaisi af b'rishayna. The halacha follows Rabbi Yossi. For Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Rabbi Yochanan says, no. Moedahaya Rabbi Yossi b'rishayna, shikvar shilam. Rabbi Yossi says, because you paid for the item and didn't make an oath, then you get to keep the kefil, and Rabbi Yossi agrees to that. So the Gemara says, shilam in because he paid specifically, loy shilam loy. But if you didn't actually pay, then you wouldn't get to keep the kefil. The Gemara says, va'amar Rav Chia, or Abba Amar Rav Yechanan loy shilam shilam amish, alkivan sh'amar reinim shalom af b'shaloi shilam. Rabbi Yechanan said, we saw this on Tuesday, that you don't actually have to pay. You just need to agree to pay. So why did Rabbi Yechanan here saying because you paid? It's because you agreed to pay. That's why Rabbi Yossi agrees that you get to keep the kefil. Gemara says you're right. Rabbi Yossi agrees that if you agreed to pay the money, then you get to keep the kefil. Then the watchman gets to keep the kefil. Rabbi Yossi only disagrees in the second scenario that the borrower pays the renter and the renter has to pay the original owner. According to the rabbis, the renter does not need to pay the original owner. That's the only debate according to Rabbi Yechanan. And that seems to be how the halacha goes. Okay. Great day. We'll see everyone tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah, may not be there.